3, 2, 1. All right. Cheers. Thanks for joining me. Glad to have you on.
Thank you.
So you're back to practices now,
huh? This week we are starting a staggered 1-hour practice at our local gym, and then for the high school we will start our first open gym on Wednesday. So kind of exciting to get back.
Yeah. How have you been handling? What have you been doing differently with the COVID stuff? Have you been having the girls do any sort of workouts or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, at our all-star gym, we've been doing just like an hour conditioning and tumbling section. And so they just have like a little 6-foot mark on the floor that they stay in for their conditioning. And then we do lines, and, we just been doing like taking their temperature and having them wash more and spending more time on sanitization. But for the most part, it's just been really simplified, and we're not able to stunt yet or anything, which has been okay. We're focusing on the basics more so and getting everyone back in shape since we've been out of practice since March. So just taking it slow. So
makes sense. So you own your own club cheer program, and then you also coach at the high school level. I guess what made you want to get into owning your own club cheer gym?
Sure. Well, when I moved to Brookings, my husband and I both attended SDSU, and I started coaching at Sioux Valley High School, which is about 9 miles outside of Brookings, and loved that. It was really enjoyable, but there wasn't a whole lot of a feeder program. So, we had kids coming into high school that had never cheered before. So we wanted to establish something for the kids to be able to do to kind of feed that program and to be able to work on the skills beforehand. It's really hard for kids to learn to tumble when they're 15, 16 years old. So we wanted to build something that they could start working on those skills early. And so we built a gym in Brookings. We're going into our 12th season now in Brookings. And we have athletes come from Brookings, Volga, Chester, Madison, Del Rapids. So we've have new kids coming from Watertown this year. So we really had a lot of surrounding areas supporting us coming out of Brookings. So that's been great.
Yeah, and speaking of your high school team, you've won all the state championships, right? How many in a row is it now?
13 now. So.
Yeah. And how long has it actually been? Have they actually been counting them?
13. So yeah. I coached. I'm going into my 19th year of coaching, I think. And before that, we just had like local events that like the Coaches Association put on and things like that. It wasn't considered a sport by the state, but we competed. We were successful. But yeah, for 13 years, it's been a sport in the state. So,
what's some of the biggest things I guess you would attribute to that long-term success?
Yeah. Gosh, I get that question a lot, and I always think I mess up answering it because I don't really know. We have just been so fortunate. I would say probably the biggest thing is that our athletes take it extremely seriously. I talk to other coaches that say that they have trouble with, attendance or things like that. And I just don't have that. Everyone shows up every single practice. They work extremely hard. They never take anything for granted. I think it would be easy to get into somewhat of a slump or a routine and saying like, oh yeah, we've won, but we don't take it for granted whatsoever. There's always somebody there knocking on the door, making sure that we're working hard. So, I think one, having strong leadership and having everyone take it extremely serious has always been a huge part of why we have been successful.
Was there any challenges that you had that you remember when you first were kind of getting going with it and this winning streak and your success, as far as how did you build that buy-in?
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, the first year I coached at Sioux Valley, coached the cheer program, I had 3 athletes. So, and now we haven't had tryouts yet, but we have 33 and we can only put 26 on the floor. So I'll have to make significant cuts this year. We usually try to take everyone, but we just won't be able to this year. But just getting people interested in a sport that they had never done before. Sioux Valley had a really great program, and then it kind of died out for a little bit. And then when I came in, we tried to build it back up. So first of all, getting people to understand it. And, the Coaches Association did a fabulous job laying the groundwork for our sport, but it's a young sport. It's changed. Our rubric has changed significantly each year. And so you really have to be able to keep up as both a coach and an athlete and make sure you understand what the rubric is asking of you, what your judges are wanting to see. And I remember when we started out, that was one of the hardest things, is just knowing what we were supposed to be putting on the floor and what they were looking for. Because sometimes, you know, it is somewhat subjective of a sport. You go out and you think you did something great, and then you don't score as well, or 5 years later you look back and think, what were we thinking? But you know, you kind of have to guess a little bit as to what the judges are going to want to see. And sometimes it's seeing what everyone else is doing and thinking like, oh, I think we can do that better, or we should try to do something different, like along those lines. Sioux Valley has always done more of a storytelling cheer, which, you know, a lot of the traditional like game day cheers or the Go Fight Wins. And we've always done more of a story just because that's what worked for us. And we've seen a lot of schools that have kind of started to go towards that. And we also put our cheer at the beginning, which gives us a minute and a half of music after that. So then they can really power through that running, tumbling section and all the pyramids and all that stuff. And we've seen a lot of people doing that. It's pretty rare you see a cheer in the middle of the routine anymore.
What were some of the what would you say is the biggest key to trying to build some of that culture, that winning culture, you know, trying to get people going, other than, you know, is it something beyond just getting them interested? You know, what else is there? You know, there's a lot of people out there trying to figure out, okay, how do we build this team, do the team building exercises and not just the skills themselves?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that, because I do a lot of camps with other schools or do choreography, and I think one of the hardest things is when the goals look unobtainable. And so, you know, if I go to a school and they can't do basic stunting, but they're wanting to put things in the routine that they see, you know, these giant schools do, it's really defeating. And I think it's really important that you start with what you can do and then build off of that. And so sometimes, you know, when you see our routine at the beginning of the season, it may not look anything like that at the end of the season because we always build. So I think it's really important for coaches to remember that. And if you set your kids up to be looking for these unobtainable things that they can't do at the beginning of the season, they're just going to feel really defeated. They go out on the floor and they drop stuff and, you know, get upset. And then it's just not that fun because really, I mean, we've all had those competitions. When is that ever fun, going out on the floor and dropping? You know, or a lot of times, you know, tumbling is a big thing in cheerleading that can be a very mental game. And if I go to a school to choreograph and the coach says, oh, just put that in the routine, like they'll have that by the season. Very rarely do they have that by the season. You know, my philosophy is let's prepare for what we can do right now, and then we can make it more difficult. And I feel like that is a challenge that helps the athlete to get better without the pressure of you have to get this skill. And so I think it's really important for coaches to remember that because, you know, it's very rare, like in football, that you would throw someone into a position that they don't know how to do and just expect them to do that perfectly. You know, so I think it's really important in practice to do those things and get it ready before you put that out on the floor.
Makes sense. Kind of make sure you're building the confidence before you get too
Absolutely.
far into the skills.
Yeah.
You do anything special as far as outside of practices, as far as team building with your teams each year?
Yeah, a little bit. You know, we always have left that to our seniors. And so we have years where it's really great and we do a ton of team bonding. And then there are years where we kind of just, the season gets away from us and we don't. But we've had a really good turnout in the last couple of years. We've done lake days and pool parties, and we actually had a tent camp out in my backyard this last year. So, and a lot of the A schools, and you know, now even some of the double A's have 7th and 8th graders on their team, and so some of those kids really don't know any of those upperclassmen. So I think it's really important to do those bonding activities so they can get to know everybody and kind of have that sisterhood or camaraderie on the team. So.
That's a little bit different to allow the seniors to do that rather than trying to set that stuff up as coaches. You hear a lot of coaches trying to talk about doing that themselves. Do you, in your experience, has that made it a little bit more organic as far as some of the team bonding, if it's not just the coach like pushing you to get together with your teammates? Yeah,
I would say so. For one thing, the seniors are a lot more cool than I am, so they want to do the things that they want to do. But and it puts some of the responsibility on the seniors. We've always had a large number of seniors. I think I've had 6 seniors for the last couple of years. I had one rare year where we had 1 senior. So there's a good number of them to be able to spread out duties and be able to like work on different things. But yeah, we really try to have our upperclassmen lead. We do things like when we condition or run, our seniors have to be at the front, and they kind of trickle down through our upperclassmen. We do not play the game of upperclassmen get out of things. Our upperclassmen lead from the front. So we make sure that they're the ones that are, pushing on conditioning, and they're doing all the things that we would want that ideal athlete to do. So, when you're walking in as a 7th grader, that's what you're seeing, is that leadership right up front.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Definitely. What does an average practice for your high school team look like then, once you kind of get into the meat of the season?
Yeah, so we start out the season about 3 to 4 hour practices, and once we're in our season, right around 2 hours. If we're in competition time, we do a mock warm up and a full out right away. So we discovered quite a few years back that our kids were struggling with some performance anxiety. And so we've gotten really into rituals. So we have the exact same warm up every single time. They know exactly what to expect. When they come into practice and say there's a competition tomorrow, they know they're going to come in and they're going to do the exact warm up that they'll do at competition. They'll walk through each thing that they're going to do, and then we do a full out. And then anything that was messed up in the routine, they go back and they'll redo that. And then throughout the next hour and a half, we, break everything down. We'll work a tumbling section. We'll work on those stunts. I have a tendency, I love stunting. And so I can get really focused on it for too long. So we usually have to write out our practices on the board, and then someone has to make me stick to that. And my assistant coach is really having to tell me to move on, because I can get really stuck on one thing for a long time. And I also really struggle with, once they get the skill, I immediately want to make it harder and see if they can do something else. And fortunately or unfortunately, my kids are really like that as well. So my athletes will immediately be like, oh, now can we try this? So a lot of times with Sioux Valley, you'll see really difficult stuff, but we sometimes struggle with our perfection. So that's something as a coach I always have to work on for myself, is to stick with that perfection and not always just trying to make the skill more difficult. Because sometimes on the rubric, you can't even get a higher score. So there's no point in making it more difficult. It's just more fun to make difficult. So, and we do that often. Our seniors and upperclassmen are constantly pushing to do the next thing, which is great. It's the ideal athlete. It's so much fun, but we sometimes have to remind ourselves, we don't have to do all these crazy things. We can stick with what we're doing and focus on that. But
yeah, that's a good point. As far as around South Dakota's high school rubric is based more on the UCA style of scoring and judging, versus more of the NCA or club style, where more flash, more transition seems to always stack up more points, right?
Yeah. And, love it or hate it, for me, our high school rubric works really well for a school my size, or a B school, that, I can have an athlete who has come in and has never cheered before, has no tumbling, but we can find them a spot on the team and have them do a skill set. With all-star cheer, you're a level 2, level 3, level 4, and that's it. Everybody on that team needs to be a level 4 for them to get max skills. For high school cheer, we're able to hit so much more variety, because we can use all these things. I have a girl that'll throw a back handspring, and then later on a girl that can throw a layout, and they can be on the same team and work together. And, that's one of the things with All-Star that also can be great on that end, but it's a little bit more pigeonholed as to what you can do. And so for high school cheer, it's more welcoming to the athletes who haven't exactly experienced that before, and they can do more things together as a team. So.
Yeah. What are the biggest differences that you've seen between high school? Is it mainly just that pigeonholing and the skill level, or what else? Yeah. What other big differences do you see?
I would say that's probably number one. If you're a level 2 athlete on a level 4 team, your year is going to be difficult. If you're a level 2 athlete on a high school team, your skill set can be used a lot more broadly. And the other thing between All-Star and high school cheer would be the pace. All-Star is so fast. We have kids that go from our high school season to where they're running full outs every day. They practice 5 days a week, and they go over to All-Star cheer and they can't catch their breath, because it's just so fast paced. And they're, immediately throwing, tuck, and then a running pass and then stunting. And so the pace with All-Star cheer is just significantly faster. But I think there's good and bad to both. I really think there's a place for both. I really love our high school season in the state of South Dakota. And then the switch to All-Star is always great too. So there's definitely a place.
Yeah, I guess personally, I'm one of those that's a big fan of more of the traditional type stuff. I've done club stuff as well, but really, like you said, at that point, you're so high pace. The more stuff you can jam into a routine, the higher the point total you get on average. I guess I more of a traditionalist from that
Right.
standpoint, where I like the clean stunts that however difficult you're doing, I like to see them look easy and that type of
Right.
thing.
Exactly.
So that's for my personal preference. Do you have a preference of which you enjoy coaching more?
They're so different. That might be kind of hard to answer, but I actually, ironically, don't coach in the all-star world. So I coach the high school, and then in the all-star, I just own and run the gym. But and I do some overseeing, but I actually don't have my name on any of the teams, and I have not been in an actual practice leading in a long time. I love it. Love going to the all-star competitions. I have 3 daughters that are all on teams, and so all-star has kind of been their place to get away from me a little bit, like not a ton, but they have their coaches and have the different skill set that they get from every coach. And I think that that is really important. I feel like, for one, if they were stuck with me forever, that would be horrible for them. And two, you can't actually coach your high school athletes in club in the state of South Dakota. So, and I'm just more of an older kids coach. I could coach my younger ones. That wouldn't interfere, but I have some really phenomenal youth coaches, so it's just not a place that I'm needed. So I'm just kind of running the gym and not doing any of the coaching on the all-star side of it. That being said, I don't know if I could pick a favorite. So I think it might be a little bit age. I love the old school cheering in terms of just the clean look and that kind of stuff. I think my brain might be getting a little old for all that fast-paced stuff. I feel like sometimes I miss what's happening and don't always ever see what's going on, but I think there's a place for both.
Do you catch yourself still liking to watch video or watch tape on stunts to try and figure out how people did something if you haven't seen it before?
Oh yeah, for sure. And then with 3 daughters, a lot of times, I'll pull them in and be like, all right, look, stand here, let's see what this is, and I can experiment a little bit with them. And our coaching staff does the same. They'll pull someone in and be like, okay, what was this? But yeah, I could spend a lot of hours watching video. That's for sure.
What would you say makes a good assistant coach for you and or a head coach at your club gym?
Yeah. That's a very easy question for me because I have a fabulous assistant coach. So for us, what works really well is dividing tasks instead of trying to talk over top of each other and figure out what we're going to do. We kind of know ahead of time. So my assistant coach is Jordan Lucas, and she, you'd see her more as our strength and conditioning coach. She always has like jump drills ready, and can do all of that stuff. And then she's really good about, if I'm like trying to look at the big picture and something's not going right in the stunt, pulling that stunt group aside and working with them specifically. Or she's really good at telling me when she's like, I'm being crazy and I don't know what I'm talking about and I need to just leave it alone and let them do their thing. So I think for a head coach, on the reverse side of that, you have to be very willing to listen and not just think that your ideas are the only ideas, and accept when you're wrong and you need someone to tell you like, no, we need to change that, it doesn't look good, or whatever that is, and to delegate, because there are so many things that she does that makes our program so much stronger. And we're kind of in a world of technology now that you need the social media side of it. You need to be able to like make it fun and engaging for your kids. And she does that for me. I'm not a big social media person. She runs like an Instagram page for us, and is really great about, we do like a celebration of like athlete of the week, Tumblr of the week, those kinds of things. And those are things that I would forget on a weekly basis. I would forget to do. And she does all that, which makes my life easier, and it makes it a lot more fun for our athletes.
I'm kind of definitely along the same lines as you. Even with this, I struggle to maintain, I don't want to open all of the new accounts on all of the new platforms and stuff like that, but trying to stay with the times as much as I can. But I know what you mean. Like when I was coaching and stuff like that, I preferred to not be the person doing that. My mind was always focused on the team, not necessarily on trying to brand the team and do that stuff.
Yeah. And if I'm spending 30 minutes on a stunt section and she's like, all right, we got to work jumps, like I need that, because I will sit on one thing for too long, and I need someone to prod me along and say, no, we got to do something different now. So
if she pulls somebody aside in practice, is she doing that while you maybe have the rest of the team like go and do a full
Yep.
run or run the whole thing, and that's not an issue for you?
No,
typically?
not at all. In my opinion, if that was an issue for me, then I need to not have an assistant coach. So, particularly if she sees something isn't working quite right in a stunt, she'll pull that stunt group while we're working on something else. Or, like I said, there's lots of different levels of tumbling for us. So if I'm working with the tucks, then she'll work with the back handsprings, or she'll work with the non-tumblers on a workout to keep them moving. So, we've just really had a good vibe where we just kind of naturally do it. Like, yeah, sometimes we plan out who's doing what and everything, but for the most part, we've been really good about just sharing the space and knowing who's going to do what. And there are so many places that I go and I see that the coaches don't gel like that because they are a little bit worried about who's getting the credit for what. And you can't do that. You have to just be like, whatever. And I'll tell you that she's the younger coach and she's probably a little more fun than I am on a daily basis. And that's okay. Like, I can be the bad guy. And then there are days where she's the bad guy. So it just depends. You have to just be really willing to be okay with that.
Yeah, I would say coach chemistry is a big thing too. I agree on that. Because if like you said, if your head coach is too worried about getting credit for everything and all of that, then it makes for a toxic environment among the coaches, which spreads to the team really easily. How long has she been with you?
Oh gosh, I think this might be her 4th or 5th year.
Okay. Does it get easier too the longer you guys are together because you know more of each other's tendencies and can flow back and forth a little bit more too?
Yeah, I think so. I do. And she was an athlete for me, and then she was gone for a few years when she was in college and then is back. And yeah, I think so. And I think just knowing each other, like, I have a very sarcastic sense of humor. And so does she. And so, that's a big thing too, is that, if I'm going to have a dry sense of humor, I hope you're going to get it and I'm not going to offend you. So, we're able to rib each other and have fun like that too. And I cannot imagine going into a practice where your coaches did not have fun with each other. That would be really tough. So I think that's one thing that makes life a little easier at Sioux Valley, is that we really truly like each other. So
do you kind of do the same thing with your athletes too, once you get to know them a little bit, where you'll rib them and give them a hard time a little bit too?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, we have a very good time with our athletes. And and I tell them right up front, like, I'll call you out. So just so you know, don't take it personal, but I'll do it. So
yeah, I found that too. It helps a lot to be able to know your athletes well enough to know where you can kind of poke and prod a little bit and where you kind of have to step back with some of them that aren't quite ready for it.
Right, for sure.
It's one of the biggest things that I think I've experienced. Biggest experiences I've had since I started coaching was trying to understand the dynamics of everybody's personality and how they need to be coached a little bit differently.
Yeah, I would say, so my oldest daughter is going into her junior year, and I think it was probably her 7th grade year. I wanted to divide the team in half before we competed every time. Like, half the team needed like a motivational pump up speech. And then the other half of the team needed that, like, light a fire under them, like, you better go out there and do your job. And it was hard because you have these different personalities and you want to make sure you're giving them what they need before they go on the floor. And to be honest, the coddling side of that, like the you can do it, is a little difficult for me. So that's where I really had to focus my attention. But it is tough when you have 26 kids going on the floor and half of them need something else. So you got to make sure you're covering all your bases there.
Yep, very true. What does a typical practice look like at your club gym when you've been there? I know you said it's been a little while since you've been there. How do they typically run those?
It's really similar to that high school. We probably get to spend a little more time on conditioning at the club level. We only see them 2 days a week, so we have to cram more into our 2 hours that we have. But I mean, we spend about the same amount of time on tumbling, conditioning, and stunting. They follow the same philosophy on like warm-ups and preparing for competitions, probably just because that's what I've always done. I would say at the club level, the tumbling is a little easier because everyone is either at the same level or close to it. So when you put them on lines and have them run skill sets, you get through it quicker because you don't have to do so many different skill sets. And it's always a little quicker when you have more equipment and more availability for things like that. So, but yeah, we run it very similar at our all-star gym as we would at the high school competitions.
Okay. Do you do captains on your teams at all?
We don't. We've always just had our seniors make, the decisions that need to be made. Like for our high school, they get to pick like the bow and the tank top and just that little stuff like that. And they do a lot of the leadership things. We always have a theme. They help with the slogan, that kind of stuff. But we've never done captains. We've never actually called it that. For one thing, we have 6 seniors coming up as well. And it's just something that I feel like they all bring something different to the table. And it's just never something that maybe I grew up with. So we just have never done it.
So do you give it to the whole group if you're going to assign something for them to do, or do you kind of select different ones depending on which thing it is then?
For the most part, we'll just give it to the whole group, and then they're pretty good at delegating and dividing up what they're going to do.
Okay.
What they're going to make.
In your average season, how far in front of your first competition are your teams typically running a full out routine?
Sometimes like the week of. So, with high school cheer, it's tough because we, so some people choreograph ahead of time. We don't. We've always just done it in season. So say we start August 3rd and we have a competition at the end of week 3, we have 3 weeks to get our routine ready. So the first couple competitions for us are usually pretty darn rocky. But that is kind of how we do things. And then at the club level, so we have June and July typically where we prepare for a choreographer. Choreographer comes in sometime in July. And then we have to take off August, September, and October because of high school cheer. And we're not supposed to be competing or practicing in that time. And we honor that. So then we come back after the state tournament, which is usually like October 25th-ish. And then we have 2 to 3 weeks to get ready for our first competition at the all-star level. So our season is not the easiest setup. That's not the best way to go about things, but our kids perform well under pressure, and they're very adaptable. That's for sure. So
do you do your own choreography then for the high school team and then bring somebody in for your club teams?
Yep. So I've always done our choreography for Sioux Valley. I love it. Choreography is probably my favorite thing. For the all-star level, I think we've used Spirit FX for about 4 years now. I think we're going into our 4th year. Honestly, it just got too big. When we're competing in Florida and all these things, we were like, we were doing okay with it. We did qualify to go to Florida 1 year on our own choreography, but we just felt like we were doing our kids a disservice by not bringing in an expert and having them teach us a little bit more. So now we always have a choreographer come in. A lot of times we'll have a cleanup camp throughout the season as well, like once, and we try really hard to get to some sort of coach's education as well as doing stuff online, just because I feel like when you think you know everything, you're starting to go backwards. So we try really hard to make sure we're still learning more.
What's the biggest difference that you found from having somebody else, a professional come in to do the choreography versus yourself?
I think the hardest thing, and I know for me when I choreograph for other teams as well, is knowing your athletes. You might have a kid that is pretty quiet and shy, but when the music comes on, they just light up and really should be at the front. And, a choreographer coming in, when you have 20 smiling faces smiling at you, you hate to say like, she shouldn't really be there, or, oh, bring this person up. So I think the hardest thing about bringing in a choreographer is just they don't know your athletes. So you really have to advocate for your team and what you need. And on the other side of that, I know as a choreographer, it can be really hard when you go to a team and coaches have like a mindset already of what their athletes can do, and you think they can do more, or you think they should be in a different position. So again, just like with the assistant coach thing, you really have to be open to communicating with your choreographer and hearing their ideas is what they're going to do, as well as giving them feedback as to what you think. So
have you done where you'll meet with the coaches ahead of time when either you're doing choreography, or if you have your choreographer come in, will they come in and meet with you ahead of time to try and go through some of that? Or is that kind of an on the fly deal?
For the all-star side of it, no, just because they fly in. So they literally just come in and work with them for that time period. So we try to have our our stunt groups and as much prepared as possible. For the high school level, the really smart teams, if they can, they'll do a camp, stunt and tumble camp first, because a lot of times for high school cheer, I know for myself at Sioux Valley, if you have tryouts and then maybe have a couple open gyms in the summer and half the kids can show up, you get to your competitive season and you don't know who can do what, who can stunt together. And to me, if you don't have stunt groups at choreography, it's really difficult. So I think it's really important to get at least one camp. And if you can get it with your choreographer, that's really good. But establishing stunt groups that work really well together is probably the most important thing for.
So you have those preset and then you let the choreographer kind of handle it from there?
Yep. And
Okay.
sometimes they'll say like, oh, I think this should be switched. But for the most part, if we have good stunt groups established, everything flows. So last year we had a little trouble with some stunt groups just because of height difference and thing that we didn't expect. And now this year I am worried about it because we're not stunting yet. And now, we're going to have to really quickly put stunt groups together and see what works before choreography. And, we've been really watching the COVID numbers in our area, but, we don't want kids breathing in each other's faces and then switching and breathing in other kids' faces. So we're just trying to kind of plan ahead a little bit in our minds who's going where. But it's tough this year, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's a little different than what I've done choreography in the past, where most of the teams that I've done choreography for, they don't really have something predefined and they kind of expect me to come in with it. I could see where it would be kind of nice to say, is that something that if you have somebody that has stunt groups put together ahead of time, will they kind of tell you that, or are you putting formations together as you're there working with them?
We've kind of shifted more towards putting it together there. We used to always have their stunt groups ahead of time, and then we'd lay out all their formations. And actually, since bringing in a choreographer for All-Star, we do a lot more on the fly now, just because we've seen that it's worked really well for transitions and things like that, to be able to more smoothly put it on the floor and see how it looks. And on top of that, then, if you come in and the stunt group just is not working, it's easier to pull apart than to rework all your formations that were already done. So we've shifted to that in the last couple of years.
Okay. Do you typically go in with at least general formation ideas, but people not placed? Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So we'll put the formations together and then just, put people into those spots. And then the other thing we do for our choreography is that we, depending on like the team and if we know them well or not, but we'll do like a beginning, intermediate, and advanced stunt section, so that if starting out they haven't worked together very long, we'll put something that we know they can do so they can feel successful, and they have something they can put on the floor, and then something they can work up towards, and then again before the state tournament, hopefully progress on that further. Because some of these teams, when you see them in October, they don't even look like the same team they've come so far. So we want to give them those progressions. So we do that for our stunts and our pyramids, and then often for our tumbling. Like I said, we'll say if they get this skill, they can go here, but let's not put them there now. So
makes sense. What would you say is through all your years of experience, is the craziest save that you've seen, or the craziest story that you've seen either at practice or at a competition?
Craziest thing that's ever happened to me personally, like I think it was year 2 of owning the gym. We had a bad injury where a girl just braced wrong and her arm bone came through the skin. It wasn't even that horrible of a fall. It just went really badly. And she recovered well. I just saw she got engaged last night on Facebook. So, but that was probably the most traumatic thing that has ever happened in our gym. But it's hard with cheer if they're doing the saves correctly. You barely even see that they are happening. Biggest save I've ever seen by a coach. We had a girl tumbling, and there was like a little kid that was not where they were supposed to be, run on the trampoline, and the tumble coach just kind of bumped the girl up, and she just tucked right over top of her, and everybody just froze for a second and caught their breath. But yeah, for the most part, I feel like a lot of the saves with cheer, well, for one thing, they're daily. And if they do them right, most of us don't even see them. I had at our state tournament last year, if you go back and watch the video, which I hope no one does because I don't want to embarrass her, but I had my flyer on my left side just completely saved this stunt. I had no idea it had struggled that much. Like, it was days later, somebody was talking about it, and I had to go back and watch the video. And I mean, obviously I had watched numerous times, never saw it one time. She did such a good job of covering what was happening below her. So I think if you have a really good mesh of your flyers and bases, sometimes you don't even notice the saves.
A lot of trust there.
For sure.
Makes a big difference in confidence of a flyer if she trusts the bases underneath her versus, and also for them too, they're willing to fight if they know that their flyer's not going to come down flying elbows everywhere, right?
For sure. I always tell my flyers, like, I should not be able to tell what's happening beneath you. Like, you should do what you're supposed to up top without me ever knowing what's happening on bottom. And this was really a true instance of that. Like, I had no idea what was going on until I really went back and looked at it. So
yeah, I've told a lot of people that flyers can stand on some garbage if you just squeeze it and make it feel like it's solid.
Yep, for sure.
Yep. I've been holding some of that before.
Yeah, that's for sure. It happens. I know.
If you had one, what is your one biggest tip for new coaches coming out trying to be successful?
The biggest thing for a South Dakota coach coming into the high school association would be, for me, and I'm just going to make a shameless plug here, join the association. It is not one of those things where people are trying to get one up on you or where they're not sharing information. Our coaches do a fabulous job of trying to teach each other, help each other out. You will find so many resources in your co-coaches. And I think it's really important to not feel like you have to know everything. I watch videos on drills and tips and different grips all the time. And I think that's really important to just recognize that we're not going to know everything, especially I think in South Dakota, we very often hire people who don't have a ton of experience in cheer. I didn't. I came from high school and had cheered in a tiny little town and was hired. Everything since then, I've had to learn. So, you know, you have to be willing to learn and to accept that you don't know everything and reach out because there are so many people willing to help if you just ask.
Yeah, for sure. That's one thing I found out too, is pretty much everybody that we talked to and sat at competitions with, or, you know, you end up being pretty good friends with everybody and able to talk and collaborate and all that.
I don't know if it's like that in other states, but I mean, South Dakota, they'll help you out. Like there's a good network of coaches that are willing to be a part of. So
for sure. And I feel like a lot of the judges are as well. You know, what they're allowed to help you with, they'll try and help you with as much as they can.
Yep. I think just as a whole, everybody is wanting the sport to grow and very passionate about cheerleading. And so nobody's out there wanting to get you. You know, it's a lot of people wanting to make this better for the kids.
Yep, I agree. Any other shout outs you want to give here before we close out?
Shout out to the state of South Dakota for allowing male cheerleaders this year. So we're going to have co-ed cheerleading this year. It'll be good. I have a boy from my all-star program that will be cheering for Brookings. So very excited to see male athletes on the floor. It'll be good.
Awesome. Well, if there's anybody out there in South Dakota that's looking for some help, I'd be willing to come help as well. So
yeah, that'd be great.
All right. Well, with that, I will give you another cheers. Thanks again for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
Hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for doing this.